All right, everyone, buckle up, because we are diving deep today
Yippee.
into some fascinating data
Oh, yeah.
about, get this, U.S. congressional resignations.
Exciting.
Over a century's worth.
A century.
We're talking 1901 all the way to 2024.
Wow. That's a lot of data.
It is. And, we're going beyond just the numbers.
Okay. Yeah.
This isn't just, looking at spreadsheets.
Right.
We're going to be talking about how American politics has shifted over time.
Interesting.
Especially when it comes to women in Congress.
I'm ready.
So the title of the analysis we're looking at today is
Hit me with it.
Gender Dynamics in Congressional Resignations.
Data on the screen, numbers come alive. Male-female flows where the patterns thrive. Visual charts, public outlets unify. Gender decoded, bringing truth to light. Watch them all drum fill. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide.
Looking at this data, the thing that really jumps out at me, it's like the elephant in the room, is this huge gap, like a chasm, between men and women resigning.
Yeah, that's really striking, isn't it? It's a gap that goes on for, decades.
Decades. So what's the deal with that?
Well, when you think about it, it kind of makes sense when you remember who was actually sitting in those congressional seats for, a huge chunk of history. For a long time, Congress was like 100% male.
An all-boys club.
Yeah, pretty much. So, the resignations, they just reflected that reality.
Right. It was just a mirror of who was there.
Exactly.
So this brings us to a super important point on the graph here, which is 1916.
Okay, what happened in 1916?
Well, this is when Jeannette Rankin, she totally busts through all these barriers and becomes the first woman ever elected to Congress.
Wow, the very first one.
Yeah, and get this, she does this before women even had the right to vote across the country.
Seriously, no kidding. That's incredible.
Talk about a pioneer.
Talk about ahead of her time.
So her election, it was a massive, massive shift. And, it's really reflected in the data, too. You can actually see it.
Oh, yeah. Where?
If you look closely, you'll notice that, female resignations, they basically don't even show up until, the 1940s.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I see.
I see it. It's like suddenly, boom, they appear.
It's crazy. Right. And it just shows how incredibly slowly Congress opened its doors to women.
A very slow process.
Painfully slow, honestly.
Yeah. Even today, with over 100 women serving in Congress, there's still, a difference in how many men and women resign.
Oh, that's right. So even though that huge gap from before, it has gotten smaller over the last few decades.
And goodness.
Yeah, for sure. But women are still resigning at a lower rate compared to, how many of them are actually in Congress.
It's interesting, right? Because you might think, well, with more women in office, the resignation rates would even out,
Yeah, you'd think. So what's going on there? Why is that happening?
Well, I think if we look back at history again, the historical context, it might give us some clues. There's this one period on the graph that's really, really noticeable, and that's the mid-1970s. And there's this crazy, huge spike in resignations.
Oh, I see that.
And most of them, almost all of them are men.
Interesting. What was going on then?
Well, this lines up perfectly with, you guessed it, the Watergate scandal.
Oh, Watergate. Of course.
Right. It was a total political earthquake. It shook the entire nation, and you can clearly see, it's right there in the data. It had a massive lasting impact on Congress.
Wow. And you can see how it affected things for years after.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This wasn't just about a few people resigning. It was about a much bigger problem, a crisis, really, a crisis of faith in the government.
People just lost their trust.
Exactly. And the effects of that, well, they went on to shape, the way politics worked for years, even decades after that.
It's crazy how one event can have such ripple effects.
It really is.
Okay, so moving into more recent times, the graph, it starts to look a bit more, kind of stable.
Yeah, it levels out a bit. Although that gap between men and women resigning, it's still there.
Like a stubborn stain. So what do you think is going on there?
You know, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's something a lot of people are thinking about. Some folks just say, well, maybe this difference is because women in Congress, they're just more committed to their jobs, you know?
That's interesting.
I mean, because they had to fight so hard to get elected in the first place.
Yeah, they had to overcome so many obstacles.
Exactly. And then there are others who say, well, maybe it's because of all the pressure and scrutiny women in politics face, you know. They're under a microscope.
Ah, so maybe it's a tougher environment.
Right. It's a complex issue for sure, and I don't think there's just one simple answer.
It's like a tangled knot.
Exactly. You got to look at all sides of it. You got to think about, like, you know, the whole fight for equal representation. And then there are these kind of like cultural expectations about, you know, women in leadership roles.
And don't forget the media, right? They're all over everything.
Oh, right. The media definitely plays a role. So, yeah, it's complicated. There's a lot to unpack there.
Definitely a lot to think about. But, you know, going back to Jeanette Rankin and her story, it makes you wonder if she could win a seat in Congress, you know, before most women could even vote. What does that tell us?
About what?
About, like, the power of persistence, you know, and how much things can actually change, even if it takes a long time.
Yeah. Her story is really something else, isn't it? Like, she had this unwavering determination, you know. She wasn't going to let anything stop her. And it's like, wow, if she could do that, then maybe, you know, just maybe, things really can change. But like she showed us, it takes real dedication and, you know, being willing to like challenge the way things are.
Totally. Well, this deep dive, I don't know about you, but I feel like my brain is full.
Yeah, mine too.
It's amazing how, you know, we started with just numbers and then boom, we ended up with this like whole story about American politics.
The numbers came to life.
They did. But now it's making me think like, okay, so what about the future of Congress? You know,
Yeah.
What's that going to look like?
Right. Like, will men and women resign at the same rate someday? And, you know, what can we all do to make that happen or to make things better?
Big questions.
Big, important question.
Well, we're going to leave those questions with you guys. That's something to ponder.
Definitely worth thinking about.
Huge thanks to you for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a wild ride.
My pleasure.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and stay curious about the world. See you guys later.
Bye, everyone.